Well, today I want to go over just a brief thing as I continue to read through the radically collaborative patterns for software makers. Software makers, not just developers, but people making the software. A mini encyclopedia. Anyhow, I was reading through it this morning, and I came across, where is it? Down here on page 38, this point that I often... nope, not that one. That I often, find is good to discuss with people. And that is when you're going through that small batch loop, right? Trying to improve your software by, people sometimes like to say data-driven, because doesn't that sound awesome? Data-driven. By coming up with a hypothesis, figuring out a way, if introducing that feature and the way of doing that feature into your software improves the process or workflow or whatever your problem you're trying to solve, and then seeing if it did or not. Now, there is an important part there. I mean, this is described very briefly here, right? But there's an important part that I often tell people that they're forgetting. And then here, you can see the book is telling you. And that is, how will we know whether it worked or not? How will we measure it and determine if it worked? And I think that really is something that many teams leave out, right? So instead of saying... when we deploy this feature, will it make people go through the workflow faster? How would we measure if they go through the workflow faster? Or do we even have the technology in place to do that? And then are we actually looking at that data and putting it back in that cycle of doing things? And I don't know. I would hazard a guess that most people don't do that. Like we in the people, supposed tech companies that do apps and online things, they spend a lot of time doing this kind of stuff. Really studying and doing data-driven ways of figuring out if the features they put in, the UI changes that they make, change how things are done. So I just let's look at that briefly, just to kind of get some background on it. Here's some lovely notes, which I will magnify for you. Oh yeah, look at that. And that is, of course, as mentioned, right? Like, you want to make sure that you measure things, right? It's really easy when you're putting a feature in or doing software, or if you're more on the ops side and you're creating a platform for developers to use, always make sure there's a way to get feedback, which is usually measurement about something, right? And because you're going to use that as feedback. Now, if you don't have this kind of, I don't know what to call it, sort of feature measurement, right? The actual... we can use an annoying, sloppy way, like, a business metric, right? Something that's about how people are using the software. Again, I'll start talking, if you're a platform developer and you're developing a platform for developers to use, you also need to come up with what these measurements are, which will be a lot more technical. But anyways, stick that in your brain somewhere. So if you don't have these kind of measurements, you're going to end up measuring the old iron triangle of things, which is basically if you've made budget, let me get my fingers in here. If you've made budget, if you've made schedule, if you've passed tests, right? So you have your QA, and then if you've delivered features, right? And this, QA and delivering features is, to use the dimming meaning of quality is the same thing. I mean, the dimming meaning adds a third thing, which is useful, which is the point that we're getting to. But you're supposed to, you'll end up tracking if you deliver what was asked for. And those things are great. It's good to monitor those too, but it's not telling you that usefulness of your software. Have you actually changed something and improved things? Now, back when I was a software developer, I found another type of metric that you'll get. And it's more of, it's definitely a metric that you can count, but it's also like a psychological problem. And you will get, every time you get a bug report, you're getting sort of negative feedback. Oftentimes, as with any endeavor in human life, you more frequently hear about when things go wrong than when things go right. And that kind of starts to shade your idea of how your software is existing in the wild. So what are some examples of those metrics? Now, this is a really slipshod list here. But I don't know, there's some to start with. You should really spend time with whether it's a product manager or a business person, or just your own understanding of the purpose of the reason you're making software, what outcomes you want to have with it, what business outcomes, things like that. But first of all, when you put a feature in, you want to know, are people aware of it? Do they actually use it, right? And the classic example here is like, advanced search versus basic search. Very few people use advanced search, right? So that's an odd example because it's generally good to have advanced search in there for your power users. That's a term I haven't heard in a long time. Power user. I wonder if that's one of those concepts that we're revisiting nowadays. But, if people don't know about the feature, as I mentioned some time ago, there's some fun paper about how that becomes a bottleneck on its own that needs to be eliminated. And then there's things like completion rate. So most all software, a lot of software that you're probably working on in an enterprise context is like a workflow of going through something, right? Like, renewing your passport, finding and buying something, approving someone's mortgage application, and on and on and on. These are all just workflows, right? So what's the completion rate for people signing up for a new account at a bank or being able to approve an immigration form or whatever, right? And measuring that completion rate is another good metric to look at. Then there's, a generic one, and I guess, also the time that it takes to do that completion rate, right? The time, that's always a good thing to measure. There's also like more generically, think about accuracy, right? So, this is kind of the equivalent in the SRE world of your error budget, right? But in the business world, I don't know, maybe returns is accuracy, but definitely in a workflow thing where someone's filling out paperwork, and if they inaccurately do it, right, that's something that software can help with, right? Software is really good if done gently and well, giving you nudges to do things accurately, right? Like changing your phone number into the right format or telling you, correcting your address, all sorts of things like that. And then also business-wise, right? Especially if you're doing a subscription-based service, doing your churn rate and retention of customers is always good. And then there's always things of just lowering the operating cost, right? And I think there's another one that I don't quite have thought of, but like, it's awareness and use of, there must be a name for this kind of thing, but I typed it in as loose causation activities, which is like often in business, you have this theory that if a user or a customer does one activity, it will drive them doing more of this other activity, right? And I think loyalty programs are an example of this, right? So if you're involved in a loyalty program at a store, frequent flyer program, whatever, you're more likely to spend more money there and buy more things, right? So getting people enrolled into a loyalty program is good and helpful. And I would imagine from all the stuff that my various financial institutions send me, if you go self-educate yourself about investing or whatever, that must also result in some loose causation of doing other activities. So all of those things that I went over and many more are things that, done properly, adding features to your software can be really good at addressing, but you have to remember to measure them to see if you're implementing them well and if you actually are changing that number around. I think most of these are about increasing, but whatever, if you're changing it in whatever direction, if you're improving the number. So just as I think two quick examples. So in I forget which one of my books it's in. I think it's in The Business Bottleneck, which you can get for free. But I think in The Business Bottleneck, I wrote up, and I speak about this a lot, like a Home Depot example of a measurement. Now, there's a team of people at the Home Depot. There's many teams of people, but a team of developers, an app team, who are focused on, buying large appliances. And they study the entire chain of people researching things, looking at price comparisons at Home Depot. And what they found is that people often wanted to go into the store, right? So they successfully went through this great piece of software to find things. And then kind of disconnected from that flow, from that software, they would go to the store to check out the actual washing machine to, touch it, see how it looks, see how it operates, measure it themselves, because, it's a bad idea to trust measurements online, right? You want to do your own measurements of things. That's been my experience. So they would want to go in store, and the sales rate was not really, it seemed to be dropping off. Like people seemed to not be buying as many washing machines as they would predict, right? So a measurement was established that if we improve our software, put these features in, we believe we will increase washing machine sales. And they were measuring that, and they found that sales did not go up. I forget exactly how they measured that. Whatever, kind of irrelevant, I guess. I don't know if it was surveys or whatever, but a measurement was made up. They remembered to measure it, and they saw that it was going down, right? Now, because they had this measurement, this drove the team to go actually study people, interview people, watch them in stores. And the issue, as they discovered, was that oftentimes they would go to a store and the washing machine wasn't there. It just wasn't in stock or on display. And so they would go somewhere else to buy a washing machine. So because they were making this measurement of the complete process of someone doing something, this is another important part of measurements, is like, don't just look at your particular part. Like I was saying, if you're not measuring business outcomes or whatever, if you're not measuring people outcomes, right, what people are doing, then you're just going to measure budget, schedule, and kind of like completion, right? And that's would tell you in this example that like, oh, we've delivered the software, we've implemented the features, everything's cool. But if we're not measuring the full end-to-end thing of people going into store and using it, if we don't consider that part of our application, that part of the product that we're working on, we're not going to measure that really, and we're going to miss it and not be able to improve it. But they found this. And, it's as with all of these examples, and particularly ones I use, it seems really simple, but they integrated with, I assume the ERP system, kind of the inventory and supply chain stuff. And they would help people locate the washing machine they wanted to look at in a store, right? So they could be more guaranteed. Oh, look, I should be working on the post-production for this now. But they could be more guaranteed that they could find that washing machine, so they should go and touch it. Now, all sorts of things contributed to that, but knowing that they should measure something, coming up with what that measurement was and actually doing it really contributed to the overall success there. So that's what I got for you today. This is written up with all sorts of other good stuff. I just also read the section on pairing in this book, which is and free snacks, which is a pretty good section. The pairing section actually goes over a lot of other things. There's a few sections in here that have a lot of ancillary things crammed into it. But you should definitely check out that book. And if you want to get that book, what you can do is if you go to, as you see, Coté.io/Tanzu Talk. That's Coté.io/Tanzu Talk. You can see the archives of everything. There's yesterday's show. You can find the past shows. And, this is yesterday's, but I talked about the same book. So if you were to click on a past show, you can just come down here and you can click on Radically Collaborative Patterns for Software Makers and get a copy of that book for free. Now, also, are you interested or being charged with putting Kubernetes in place or a cloud native platform? If you, most people say that skills and training is the hardest thing to come across, along with budget and other things. But skills, when it comes to staffing, people are very concerned about that in surveys. And, my advice would be, sure, you can hire people, but why don't you take care of the people that you already have? You probably have a lot of people already who are doing operational things. And the first step is totally for free. They can go to kube.academy, do a bunch of entry-level training. You don't even have to sign up for an account, as I recall. And then if you create an account, still totally free, you can go and check out all these courses that we have. And you can get a pretty good understanding of how to start with Kubernetes, what it does. And also you can get kind of like, if you remember the interviews I had with Bosky, if you're a VI admin out there, you can start to figure out how to translate to that and use it as well. Hey, look, there's another one. Just in case you didn't know, this is how you can find the show notes. You go to Coté.io/Tanzu Talk. There's some other way we're rigging up, but I'm going with that for now. Also, we've got a great developer site, all sorts of topics you can dig into. As you can see, if you go to tanzu.vmware.com/developer, it occurs to me I need to do that trick that I do in lots of my podcasts where when I'm doing an ad here, I put something interesting at the end that makes you at least scrub through the ads instead of stopping watching entirely, if not kind of suffer through them. Maybe I should use funny voices too. That would be fun. That's a good tactic. Now, finally, if you're interested in getting kind of figuring out in a consultative way how to kind of start with your application modernization journey or just doing better at software, you can sign up for some office hours. Again, if you just go to the show notes page, you can click on going there, and there you go. Fill that out. It might be an hour, half a day, or more, or whatever, and you can figure that out too. Also, there's links to those free books that I mentioned, and with that, it's always nice if you help me get more eyeballs for this stuff. If you just want to like it in YouTube, put it in your LinkedIn or your social medias, email it to someone, print it out frame by frame, send it to your relatives as a holiday gift, whatever you like. but I'd appreciate it. And with that, we'll see everyone tomorrow. Bye-bye.